I tell you, they really done a good job of working hard. That's one thing that I think it's a group that they've got good character about them. We got a long way to go. New system, new things. But we have a group of guys that it's important to try to be a good unit. I think they want to kind of prove themselves as to be a lot better unit on the field, and so they've done a good job of working everything that we've asked them to do. Obviously, we've only had really 5 practices and a scrimmage, so that's kind of tough to kind of tell exactly where you're at. You're installing, you have that part. We'll get a little bit more. They'll have more familiarity with what we're doing. The last half of spring, and this is where we want to build the toughness and build that out of the unit. And if you're going, you can talk about being tough, you can talk about being hard, but you got to live that way if you're going to be that. So it'll rev up the last half of spring.
Next question from Mark Murphy.
Yeah, Coach, Mark Murphy inside the Auburn Tigers at 24/7. How much of a learning curve is it for the guys with you as a new offensive line coach? And also, how important is chemistry within the group going to be this year?
Well, I think that's that. I'll just start with the terminology part of it. Be, being in my career, there's been 4 or 5 different times that I've been somewhere new, and I think that's probably the first thing that football is probably a little bit different than any other sport. Just the terminology and the communication part of it. It may be something that they've done before, but now they're hearing again another term that means the same thing. So you have to overcome that within the scheme. You have to overcome the fact that they're hearing new plays, and really with offensive line, it's such a repetition position. Sometimes things, they'll get better with that the more they do it. So really more communication terminology is probably the hardest part, getting somewhere new. Geez, man, I forgot your second part of your question.
Chemistry within the unit.
Oh yeah, there's no question. In the offensive line, that's probably as important as anything. It's kind of a unit within a unit, a team within a team, I guess is a good way of saying it. Every group that I've been a part of that's been a productive group or a good unit, they've had great chemistry. They've cared a lot about each other. They've cared about their program. They've cared about their university. Character is so important at that position. I do think I see some of that in the group in the little bit of time that I've been around them. So that's a start. It's hard to be successful at this position if you don't have that.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Next, we'll go to Brian Matthews.
I will. Brian Matthews, AuburnSports.com Rivals. Want to ask you sort of a two-part question. How's the pass pro look so far this spring, particularly tactical? And then have you or will you look at making any, moving guys around, after this week break?
Yes, it's a good question. It depends on which play on the pass protection. There's been times it's been pretty good. There's been times it's been not so good. So we've got to become more consistent there. Got to be, and not just at tackle. We got to be more consistent all the way across the board. It's so much playing as a unit. Obviously, if you're pretty good in the middle of your pocket, then that helps those tackles. If the middle of the pocket's giving up a lot of push, then all of a sudden those issues show up on that tackle. And so it's not just that it's all 5 have to do their part to be successful, but we've got to improve a lot on that. There's a lot of new terminology in the pass protection things that we've got to get better at, and then just the scheme part of it. So we've got to improve. We've got a lot of work to do on that part of it. Again, you guys got to quit asking these 2-part questions now. You got to help me out on the second part. So we had pass protection, and then what else did we have?
I was asking about if you switch anybody from guard to tackle.
Yeah, really,
Or will.
yeah, really the first part of spring, and it kind of goes back to the same question. Like I said, offensive line is a repetition thing. I guess offensive line coaches are a little bit too. So I'll be saying the same thing over and over. Obviously you want to find the 5 best players, and to do that, you got to get to where you can put some guys in different spots to see who those best 5 are, and we'll have to get to doing some of that. It's obviously tough when you're just installing plays and just learning to play those positions, that you like to give them a chance to kind of succeed somewhere before you start moving around. So as we get going, we'll start making some changes. And it'll be small changes first. It may be a right tackle getting some reps at left, or or a left guard getting some reps at right guard, things like that, and then just kind of eventually move on from there. But you want to have guys that can play a lot of positions, because at the end of the day, you don't. If you're in when we get to the season, you don't want to. If an injury happens, you don't want to have to put a guy out there and you're putting your eighth best player out there when your sixth or seventh best player is standing on the sideline with you. You want to make sure you get who your best five are and who the best five are after injuries too. So yeah, there's no question we'll get to that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next question, Jordan Hill.
Hey, Will, Jordan Hill, Black Auburn News. Want to ask about your relationship with Mike Bobo going back to Georgia and obviously Colorado State. How did that sort of get started? And then when he came to Auburn, how fulfilling was it to follow him here?
Well, Coach and I actually, it was 2002, I guess. I went to Georgia as a graduate assistant, and so that's where we were both young coaches. He was the quarterback coach, and I was a graduate assistant, and that's kind of where our relationship started on that staff together, and just kind of always stayed in touch with each other. Our dads were high school coaches. We believed in the same things offensively, and really just had a good working relationship. And on off the field, our families were close. Families lived close to each other, so all that kind of played into part too. But it was really, just staying in contact professionally. I moved on and was at UAB for some time, and then had the opportunity to come back to Georgia, and we worked together there. And then had the opportunity to go with Mike when he became the head coach at Colorado State, and so went there, and really just some of the best professional years that I've had were working with Mike, working within his system, and so yeah, that was a blessing to get. We wanted to get back together, and kind of made a stop somewhere else, and then ended up in Auburn. But it's great to get back working with each other.
Next, Philip Marshall.
Will, you had kind of a crazy off season, I guess. Did you ever think that you would be an old Alabama guy, that you would wind up coaching at Auburn?
Well, I kind of, when you make the decision to get into it, as you know, Philip, it's you play somewhere, and then you kind of get into coaching, and people, especially since I've come back here, family and people have asked me, and I was at Georgia for, I guess, 6 or 7 years total. I was at Tennessee for 3 years. I mean, it's kind of, once you go into the coaching business, as you know, it's about coaching, and it's about the staff that you're on, and those teams that you're on, and wherever you're at, you're kind of always be connected with there. I mean, there'll always be a part of me that'll be a Colorado State Ram. There'll always be a part of me that'll be a UAB Blazer, a Georgia Bulldog, because you become close to relationships, those things. You become entrenched with those guys that you played, and while you're there, you meet former players from those programs, and it'll be the same thing here. And but you always had so much respect. My position coach in college was Neil Callaway, who coached here for a long time, and so I knew a lot of guys from that era, the Coach Dye era, that I had met through working for Coach Callaway. I worked for Coach Callaway for 4 years when he was the head coach at UAB. So a lot of connections with guys I knew, and just so much respect for this program and the toughness that this program's always had. So to get a chance to be here and work here, it's great.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Question from Bill Cameron.
Coach Bill Cameron from The Drive on ESPN 106.7 here in town. I know, as you said, it's only been a few practices, but has there been a player or players that have sort of stepped up or taking steps where you feel like you can use them as building blocks on the line?
Yeah, without just getting into everybody's had some plays. I don't want to get into just throwing out names, and you go through a practice. It's been kind of up and down, which is not uncommon when you're new to things. I would like to get a little bit further into it to kind of see who has the carryover coming back from the time off, and then now who can develop in these techniques, and who can kind of strive as we put a little bit more pressure on them, and really become a player. I'd like to kind of wait and see, but they've worked hard, they've studied hard, and we're in the right direction, but we got to go finish it off. The practice opportunities we get the next 2 weeks. I'm gonna hold on just throwing out any names just yet.
All right, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Question from Gianna Hahn.
Hi, Coach. Carson mentioned that you're working with what you have at tackle, but that's a position you're really going to have to recruit. How is that going, and what are some of the things that you're specifically looking for when you're recruiting that position?
Well, I think you obviously want to find some guys that have some range on the edge that can pass protect and stay in front of guys. Do they have the frame and length to put on weight the right way? But guys that can run, guys that can stay in front of guys in this conference, it's hard to find guys like that. And the other thing that happens to you is that it's very few of them that are right now ready to come in and play tackle in this league. So can you find a guy that's got the right makeup, the right qualifications as far as is he wired the right way to improve? Is he wired the right way to be a worker? Is he a guy that's going to get bigger and stronger because of his frame? Because most of them aren't ready to come in and play tackle truly in this league. So you're looking at character, you're looking at all those things, but probably if you say one thing that they got to be able to do, they got to be able to cover some space on people on the edge. So that's what we're trying to do, and we're just, we're trying to get better with the guys that we got here. I mean, we've got guys that are willing to go work, we got guys that are willing to improve, and let's go to work and get it done.
Okay, we got 4 more in the chat. That's about what time we have left.
Gotcha.
So next we'll go to Tom Green.
Hey, Will, Tom Green with AO.com. I just want to ask you about, what that first month after the season was like for you, going from Tennessee to South Carolina, and then a couple of weeks later coming to Auburn. Just what was that whirlwind like, and did you have a chance to even buy a house in South Carolina?
No, and and let me start. I have a lot of respect for the South Carolina program and Coach Beamer. I think he'll do a really good job there. So it was no knock on them, I guess is what I'm saying. But he's an outstanding coach, and that's a good program. It was just a matter of having the opportunity to come with Mike, and then having the opportunity to come to be back in a state that I'm, I've lived a lot of my life in, and my family's from here. Like I said earlier, how much respect I have for this program, but also how much respect I have for the state of Alabama, the football, and how important football is in the state of Alabama. It's home for me. I lived 18 years in Mississippi, and probably just as close of my years if you add them up in the state of Alabama. So that was exciting. As far as that month after, I got hit with COVID, so it wasn't a whole lot I could do other than sit around in the house. So I tested positive right after our first game and had to wait the 14 days, and then was in Columbia for a couple of days, and then in Auburn. So it probably wasn't as hectic as you would think.
Next question, Nathan King.
Hey, Will, Nathan King, Auburn Undercover. When you have a guy like Brandon Council, who obviously has the starting experience and is able to play at a high level, but he's out right now and not able to be in that starting 5 mix, I guess how do you evaluate the group knowing that he might be back at a future date, but you've obviously got to work with what you've got right now?
Well, and it's when you go somewhere new, it'll be this in everywhere across the country where there's new people. Sometimes it's everybody gets a fresh start. It's all 0 to 0 when we got in here, and how you work right now, the way you prepare right now. When you talk about who ends up being those 5 guys, starts from when I got here, not before I got here. So that has to be. They have to understand that, and that has to be put out right away. Unfortunately for Brandon, he's injured. That happens in the sport sometimes. So he's obviously not been able to go this spring, and he's having to focus on getting healthy, and then he'll get his opportunity to be his 0 start, all right, from scratch when he gets out in fall camp. But it's like anything else. You got to go with who you got, and you got to go that's reps for guys to improve. That may be a younger player or whatever it may be. And again, it's an opportunity for those guys to prove to me, to Coach Bobo, to Coach Harsin, who can be counted on. And that's what we're number one thing you're looking for is guys who can be counted on. You don't want to depend on the undependable, and so that's kind of what spring ball's out. Who can be counted on, and then Brandon will get his opportunity to prove that in fall camp.
Back to Philip Marshall.
Well, obviously, a new staff, there's always challenges when you take over late, and not being able to get out on the road, not being able to have official visits. How challenging has that made recruiting so far?
Yeah,
Like y'all done?
well, I think one thing that's tough, Philip. I think it's tough because a lot of these guys that are in this, at least in the previous classes, you may have saw them at a camp or something. When this group that you're seeing now, we're working on. They were, I guess, the spring of their 9th grade year. My math isn't very good, but you weren't able to. You hadn't been able to see these guys. They hadn't been able to come on campus. You hadn't been able to go off campus to see them. So, in a position where size is so important, it's hard to say. That makes it tough. Hopefully we're not far away from being able to see recruits again and us get on the road and kind of be able to see. But that makes it tough because really it's hard to tell sometimes actually what the size of a player is on a high school tape, if that makes sense. And that's been a difficult challenge, but everybody's got the same challenge. I was actually a pro scout was in the other day talking when we had pro day, stopped by and we're talking about. He's like, man, how do you know what a guy really looks like? And you don't right now. So, but everybody's got to deal with that. So that'll be something that hopefully is not far around the corner. Whatever happens with that, but you got to rely on high school coaches. You got to rely on people that you know that you trust, and hopefully people are honest with you. If their size meets those requirements we talked about, then you have to trust people.
And we'll
How
finish.
hard has it been? I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Phil.
How hard has it been with a staff with mostly guys who don't have much familiarity with Alabama, and how valuable has that been for you that you do and that you are familiar with Alabama and Alabama high school coaches, et cetera?
Well, and I think probably the biggest challenge that we probably have, if you want to talk about it in recruiting, is the fact that we can't go on the road right now. That we do have some coaches that aren't from this area that haven't been able to go out and see how close we are to a certain city or whatever, or see when you're trying to recruit a guy that you realize he's an hour from here, whatever it may be, if that makes any sense. You're having to do everything from your office, and that makes things a little tough. I know, like when I went to Colorado with Mike, if you would have said, "Hey, all right, you're here, but you can't go on the road," I would have had no idea how far Los Angeles was to Denver, Colorado, if that makes any sense, And so sometimes that helps when guys can go out on the road and they're able to kind of can see that. And we've got guys on this staff that can help with that. We can help explain, where closeness is to people and what kind of football they play in that area so much. And but people are people, relationships are relationships. No matter if you're from Mars, if you're a good person, people are going to realize that, and you'll be able to build relationships with people.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
And we'll finish up with Jason Caldwell.
Well, I guess how valuable is it to have a guy like Nick Brahms in the middle that's played football, has some experience,
Right.
kind of going through it, and to have a guy like that, how important is it to build, kind of build around?
Well, no question. I think if you're going to be successful, and like a lot of sports, man, it starts in the middle. There's no different in the offensive line. I think that's important because that guy's got to be a guy that is kind of your glue that holds it all together. He's connected to front side, back side of runs and pass. He's where the communication starts. He's the one that's connected more to the quarterback than anybody else. So that's important. You have to be productive, and you have to be good at that position. So it's good to have a guy with some experience that's back, and Nick seems like a guy that really wants to work. It's important to him, and he's worked hard this spring.
Coach, thank you very much.
All right, guys, thank y'all.